Greetings, everyone. This is Sage Armageddon coming to you live with another Sage's Dojo session. Thank you to all that are attending today. Now, in this video, at the request of one of our fellow Chun Li enthusiasts, I'm going to go ahead and discuss block strings in a little bit more detail. Like I said, a lot of these videos that I make, they are not intended to be the most exhaustive, complete, quote unquote perfect list that has every ounce of information in them. Um, they just have the information that I am aware of in the moment or of in all time. There are definitely some things that I am not aware of. However, I will bring what I am aware of to the table. Of course, I have learned a lot through observation, through my own experience, as well as from other players across multiple fighting games. So, or just other games in general, right? Ideas, etc. So, this won't be an exhaustive list, of course, but it'll be my own spin on it, and it will likely be it'll likely, hopefully, this information will be useful to people the way that I explain it. Might help things to click in a way that they might not have gotten it before. But this was going to be more about block strings. Now, of course, as we know, block strings are basically when you string together a series of commands as your opponent is blocking them. Right. Now, obviously, you have your combos or hit strings, which is where your opponent is actually being hit by things. Right. Now, one of the key differences here outside of the person taking damage is that the frame data is different. And one of the key differences between if they're getting hits, obviously, if they're getting hit, as we can see, we have 5 frames of advantage. Now, it just so happens that when you have around 5 frames of advantage, your opponent is not able to mash through it, even with an with an OD reversal or a super. See, if you delay it, you can get mashed on. But you have 5 frames of advantage, so the 4 frame jab comes chaining after that, they can't mash through it, right? So, outside of you getting way more frame advantage and your opponent actually taking damage, are some of the most notable things. Another thing that's notable about, that's notable about them being hit versus whether they block it is, of course, if they block it, you're usually at a frame disadvantage unless it's a very specific move, right? So in this situation, Ryu can put us in a blender. If we try to press, assuming that he will use the fastest move he has, which is a 4 frame jab, at this range, if we try to do anything, like if we try to press any buttons, any of our normal buttons like this stuff right here, he's going to beat us, right? So he can put us in a blender at this range, especially he can throw us, he can run some Oki bullcrap like this and with drive rush and just make us guess right. So if we do a single jab, we're obviously -3 in his face. That's not a good thing, right? So the reason why I want to bring these basic fundamentals up is because with block strings, it's more of a mindset type of thing. You have to be careful because a lot of the times when you're doing block strings, your opponent actually can interrupt you, depending on what it is. Now, obviously, if you're doing something like this right in their face, with most of the cast that can do this type of thing, usually they're Shotos or characters that are more balanced in nature, like Ken, Ryu, right? Some of them can't do freestanding, like Ryu can't do freestanding because of the pushback, but he can do something like this, right? Chun Li can just do this though, luckily, right? And what's happening here is the way that it works when you're chaining together jabs this close. It's pretty much they can't interrupt with normal buttons. Right. I'm sorry, we're gonna do that on block. Set the dummy to light punch on block. So they're gonna get counter hit, right? Which means if you're able to do that when they're doing a jab, that means every other normal that they possess is going to get stuffed. So your opponent using normals is not an option if they are blocking. You don't have to worry about any of their normals ever being a thing, right? Because the fastest move they have can't work. Now the thing is technically speaking, the bot can mash through this. Let's go ahead and set them to do an OD Shoryuken. Reversal. No, we want to. I'm sorry. We want to do that on block. Let's go ahead and set that here. There we go. See, technically they can mash because we're so negative, and that's that's a reversal. So they can also parry. They can do drive impact, though. You could just counter drive impact by doing your own drive impact like this. Right? Cancel. See. So if your response speed is fast enough, then you can respond to that. So you don't have to worry about drive impact unless you just have bad reactions to it like me, but I digress. And technically they can super as well. We can also set the dummy to do a super on block here. Let's go ahead and get, we want super arts. Let's go ahead and get a Shin Hadouken. All right. So parries, that they can parry, they can drive impact, they can do supers, and they can do OD reversals. However, they can't do anything else, including jumping, right? When you're doing something just as simple as that, right? So their options are heavily limited. Now, the key thing with this is it's all in the mindset. It's all about thinking about things in a specific way based upon what you are aware of in the game. Now, the key thing to it is that some of these moves, if you look at do you see the frame meter right at the bottom? You see where it says startup frames at the top, startup frame 6 frames? That's this move. You notice how right underneath there you see a bunch of colors. You see like 5 green squares, 4 red squares, and 14 blue squares. That's pretty much showing you the startup frames, the recovery frames, and the startup frames, active frames, and the recovery frames. So the startup frames, which is the green, notice how that says 5, but it says 6 right here. It says 6 because you actually pressing the button and it registering through your peripheral, your controller or stick or whatever it is that you're using. That takes a little bit of time. It takes about maybe 1 frame. Technically, this should be a 5-frame move. This technically should be a 4-frame move, right? So that's pretty much what it's telling us. So at the top there where it says startup, it's giving us the actual frames while accounting for all of the information needing to be processed before it shows up on the screen, right? So it's about an extra frame. So technically speaking, notice how it says 6 frames here? It's technically 5, right? So now that we're aware of that frame information here, when we're fighting against our opponents and we're looking at the frames and stuff like that, when we're putting block pressure on them, it's all about the way that you think. So the Ryu bot, technically speaking, the Ryu bot can just do that through anything you do. However, in an act, the Ryu bot is just putting the command in instantaneously. It's not using a peripheral or a controller or anything. It's just instant boot, Shoryuken, without failure, right? A real person is going to have to input the input for this, which is something like this. And then they're going to have to push 2 buttons as well. So the likelihood of somebody doing this with the likelihood of somebody doing something like this without being hit is almost like impossible, right? Let me go ahead and demonstrate what I mean. I'm going to go ahead and pick Chun Li here as the bot. And I'm just going to have the Chun bot do jab, jab, jab. And then we're going to go to the corner here so we don't have to keep resetting it. And Chun Li's going to go ahead and... I didn't set it right. There we go. Okay. And you're going to do that. And I'm going to try to mash through it. You see how that's going for me? You want to know why? Because I have to put in the input for it, which requires me to stop blocking. I got it right there, but I got hit. You see that? I'm pretty sure that was it. As you look at my commands right there, there's no essential commands there. Everything is just straight down for the last like 10 inputs, right? Down plus kicks. So I got hit out of it. A reversal. And Chun Li's reversal is just as good as like Ryu and Ken's, right? So right there, I got it at the third one because I had a little bit more space. But when they're that close, it's almost impossible to do that. It's even worse with a super because when you try to do it, you're probably going to get hit. And once you get hit, you can't. You can't, as we discussed earlier, you cannot mash that crap out. So I'm trying my hardest to mash a super through this, but I just can't do it. I can't do it. Right. Trying to mash Tenso through this, but it's really hard except for the last part of it. So it's your opponent trying to mash through this. They're not gonna time it perfectly or anything like that. Like it's I don't know. I don't even think the highest level players could do that. So we're gonna go ahead and reset the Ryu bot here. But I think you get the point here. An actual opponent ain't going to be able to mash through that, right? Even if you're being predictable with it, because of how hard it is to do that without being hit, because you have to stop blocking for the input to come out, right? So, in theory, you can't get away with this, but in actual practice, you kind of can with these punches specifically. So this is definitely a very common block string you can do here at like all levels. At higher levels, if you're doing this, you become predictable and your opponent will know how to run a set play to deal with you if you try to do that all day. But if you're sparing and smart with it, that's technically a block string that you can do, right? So you can also do something like this. Like I said, when you're doing block strings, technically speaking, you can be interrupted, as we show with this. But especially when you're out of range of that, when you're not chaining together jabs like this, if you're doing medium punches, medium kicks, heavy punches, heavy kicks, things like that, unless it's a move that specifically gives you frame advantage, it's going to be your opponent's turn. In this case, it's neutral. Ryu and Chun Li can both go at the same time, right? If we both push jab here, we're going to trade. Let's go ahead and show for an example. Light punch on block. We're going to trade, right? Because both of our jabs are 4 frames, and if I don't mistime it, remember the bot's not going to mistime it. It's going to be perfect timing pretty much every time. So if I get jabbed, it's because I'm mistiming it. But if I don't mistime it, as you can see, it's going to be a trade, right? So that's what happens in this situation because it's 0 frames. But if I do something where I'm negative, like let's say if I do something like, let me get a better example because I'm going to be too far to be able to do it. So I'm going to get my friend Ryu here to do a crouching medium punch on block. Now let's turn that off so we can see the frames. Notice I'm -2. Ryu's crouching medium punch is 6 frames as well. So what's going to happen is if I try to do a crouching medium punch after doing something like that, I'm going to lose. Right? See? I'm just going to lose. Right? Oh, I lose this. Right? I'm going to lose this exchange because when you're doing block strings, unless you have something that specifically gives you plus frames or gives 0 frames of advantage to either you or your opponent, unless it is one of those 2 situations, it's going to be your opponent's turn. And I bring this up because you know that's going to be the case, right? Now, if you're doing stuff right in front of their range like this, you're going to lose your turn. Like, for example, if I do something like this close to Ryu's just gonna do this, and then he's gonna do some bullcrap like this, and then throw me, and then do whatever his throw game is, which I think this is a drive, rush, grab, right? So when you're negative this close to your opponent, that's a bad thing, right? Because it's almost the same as Ryu doing something like this to you and you're blocking it. right? He's plus two in your face. Hey, you know how it is when Ryu does this bullcrap. It's time to go on the Wheel of Fortune, right? It's time to go on the Ferris wheel. You're gonna be spinning, right? So that's what happens when you're negative in your opponent's face and they know what they're doing, right? So you don't want that to happen. So outside of this is a very special type of chain with Chun Li where you can get three jabs consecutively and they pretty much can't interrupt it. It's almost impossible to interrupt that. But outside of that, if you're doing like anything at this range, if you're, it's your opponent, like I said, unless you do something that specifically gives you plus frames or that is zero or gives 0 frames of advantage to either player, you are going to be at a deficit, right? Which means that it's your opponent's turn. And when it's your opponent's turn, that means they get to put you in a blender. If you press something and you're in the range of whatever button they press, you're going to get counter hit, and then they're going to put you in a tornado and grab you all day, right? So we don't want that to happen. And that's where the block strings, we want to be methodical with our block strings. And all that stuff that we mentioned before was to help to prepare us to understand how we can use our block strings a little bit better. One of the key things when it comes to block strings is not only knowledge of frames, as we saw here, typically our frames, because we're the ones that are aggressing. So we're putting ourselves at a advantage or disadvantage. So now when it comes to dealing with being negative like that, that's where spacing comes into play. These moves all have pushback. If it didn't have pushback, you can technically just keep doing this to Ryu all day long, right? Even in the corner. If Chun Li was not being pushed away from him, you could just keep mashing this all day long and they would have to just keep blocking infinitely. So, but this pushback can also be used because it creates space. See, in this situation, it would be Ryu's turn, right? But what if we do this? See that? I'm too far away for him to do something. Right? So he can't he can't actually win this exchange if he presses immediately, right? Ryu would have to delay his button so that we would whiff and he could catch us, right? That's how that would work out. If Ryu does not do that, if he does his button immediately, we're too far because of the pushback. Right. So when we're using our block strings, we want to keep in mind when we're at an advantage and at a disadvantage, and then work with that information and then go from there into using spacing, correct? So let's say, for example, if we did something like this. If we did this, we're +1, right? That means, logically speaking, you can apply this logic. If you have a frame of advantage, you can either subtract that from your frames or you can add it to your opponent's. So if we take this one frame and we use this, we can subtract it from Chun Li's attack, which would make it 5 frames in theory. Or we can have it so that since we are +1 here, if Ryu does this attack, we would actually go ahead and add the frame to his kit. So if he does this again, it's 7 frames. So it's like it's slower. Now, this logic might sound confusing, but it's just a way to help visualize the frame situation. If to help give you a visualization of what's happening if you are actually, if you're really in depth at using frame data. So in short, in the simplest way I can put it, it's letting us know that our move is coming out faster than his, and his move is coming out slower than ours. Now, if you use that method of thinking, you don't want to add a frame to you. You don't want to subtract a frame from your button and add a frame to his button. You want to pick either or. You're either going to subtract from your button that you do, or you're going to add to his button that he does. Not both simultaneously, only one or the other, right? So if we assume that after doing this, we have one frame of advantage, If we apply this to Chun Li, that means that our next move is faster than Ryu's. It's technically 5 frames, and his is going to be 6 frames, and that means that he's going to lose this exchange. See, the first time I didn't time it correctly, that's what that is. If I time it correctly, Ryu loses. Remember, the bot can't... Glitches could happen, I'm sure, but 9 times out of 10, the games should work. These bots are not going to mess this up. So if I'm messing it up, that's because of me. That's because I'm having sloppy timing. But Ryu's going to lose this exchange because my move is coming out faster than his. Alright. So, using this frame advantage, this move, for example, you can use this to do all types of shenanigans. Now, it depends on what your opponent is deciding to do. It's tricky. It's not easy to know what your opponent is going to do, but as you get more experience, you can kind of take guesses what they're going to do. If you're this close, 9 times out of 10, they're not going to use a move like this. Like, if Ryu's this close to me, he's probably not going to do this or this because they're slower. If you happen to whip out a jab when he decides to do something like that this close, he's going to get stuffed. See? Usually, that's why pros tell you to stay out of the range of their furthest reaching attacks, because they're going to use those moves to reach you from over there, right? They're not going to do it right in the face because they can easily get stuffed by anything faster. It's like, it doesn't make any sense to just do a heavy punch this close unless it is a very specific reason, like you're doing a block string or something like that, or you are comboing your opponent and they're being hit, right? But other than that, you really, really don't want to be using long range moves up close. So logic dictates that if you're fighting somebody that doesn't know what they're doing, they might press anything. But if you're fighting somebody that doesn't know what they're doing, you should be able to cook them pretty easily if you do know what you're doing, right? Like, if you are fighting somebody that does know what they're doing, like a high master or a grandmaster or something like that, they're most likely not going to use a heavy punch this close. So that means that they're going to use buttons like these, right? They're short/light attack, where they're going to try to throw you. So with that knowledge in mind, that eliminates the options that you have to deal with when you do this. So they're most likely going to try to do something like a jab or something like that. But it doesn't matter. If you do a jab after doing this, every button that they press loses. Unless they do like a reversal or super or something like that, right? Every normal button that they press loses because their jab is going to lose. We're going to have Ryu do a light jab here, and our light jab is going to stuff him. This automatically means that anything else that he tries to do is going to get stuffed. Doesn't matter what it is, right? If I time it correctly, it's going to get stuffed. So when we're doing block strings, plus frame moves are very, very valuable if you have a way to get them. That's what Drive Rush can also help too. Drive Rush can make a lot of moves plus that normally are not. As you can see, this is normally 0 frames. It's 4 frames when you do this, right? So getting plus frames is very valuable for helping with block strings because your opponent can't do anything, right? You're probably thinking like, okay, what if you do this into that? It depends on if their light jab can reach you. If it can, then you're gonna jab you out of this, right? But if you space it, I don't think Chun Li can space it well enough. But there we go. It's tricky. Ryu's limb goes pretty far, but if you have a character with shorter, if you time it perfectly, as you can see, you can kind of get away with doing this against certain characters. And that's just because the move has such short range. But in theory, if you had plus frames, and like if you did something like, let me see, something that is plus, let's go ahead with, this is +1. Let's see if we can space it perfectly. See? We space it perfectly. Ryu's jab can't reach us, so we can still win that exchange, even though he should win, because what's happening is even though we're +1, that's making this 5 frames, and he's doing a 4-frame jab, so it's still faster than what we're doing. But because of the pushback on this block, he can't actually reach us if we space it if we space it well, right? See, the jab can't reach us. So when you're trying to do block strings and block pressure, you want to keep mind of your frame advantage as well as the spacing between you and your opponent. Using all the knowledge that we just talked about with what your opponent is most likely going to be pressing at any given time. If you're fighting somebody that is actually formidable, 9 times out of 10 they're going to use light buttons at short range. At short to medium range, they're going to use medium buttons, and at like full medium range this far, they're going to use heavy buttons, right? Sweeps and crap like that. Even lower level players, you'll just see them bust out a sweep when you're this far, right? Or they use drive impact because it goes really far, right? So it's just logic. It makes sense, right? So if you do something like this, he can't reach you if you push them back enough. So this creates a situation where you can, if they press something, you can technically whiff punish that, like this. Now, whiff punishing, I'm not going to go over whiff punishing too much here, but whiff punishing a light move is exceptionally difficult. But if you're doing something like this, you're probably planning on them trying to do it to bait them out anyway. So you're pressing the button anyway, right? But like I said, if you were to, that's +1. That's the same. Let's go ahead and turn him off so you're not confused by that. 14. This is +1 if you do a drive rush. So it's the same frame advantage of this. But because of how far away we are with the other one, Ryu can't reach us. If we try to do this right in his face and do the crouching medium punch, we're gonna get counter hit every time. But if we get +hit frames and we're pushing him from this far, he can't reach us, right? So when you're doing block strings and stuff like that, you want to keep in mind the spacing between you and your opponent. Let's say if Ryu tries to do a crouching medium punch, see? Technically speaking, if we do that right in his face, we're going to get counter hit, as you can see. It doesn't matter whether we do the light option, the light punch. It doesn't matter what Serenity stance option we pick. He's going to beat us with his crouching medium punch because us doing this into the stances, we're so negative. The only thing that we can do safely is block, right? But because if you do it at the perfect spacing, look at that. He's whiffing, right? So that's a way that you can use the block strings to your advantage when you're trying to make your opponent block, is try to space them out so that they can't hit you with certain moves. It's a fast-paced game. People are going to go by what they're seeing in a moment's notice. Even though people know and have knowledge, like if you're fighting a pro player, they have knowledge, or just a really experienced player, they know that if they press a button in this situation, they're probably going to get stuck. But in the heat of the moment, you have milliseconds basically to track what's happening, and it's hard to do that. So they're going to see something happen, and they might press a button, and they'll press a button thinking that they're going to get you, and with their instinctually, they're going to think they're going to reach you as a subconscious reflex, and then they end up whiffing like that, right? So that's a part of the key thing when it comes to block strings. You can also do this with Chun Li's jab too. You can kind of dance around their range and then whiff punish them like this, right? Because technically speaking, if we do a jab in their face and block it, we're -3. So that means the next jab that we do will be, we're gonna add, since we're -3, we're gonna add those frames to our next jab. So that means that our next jab would be 7 frames slow, which means Ryu's 6-frame jab would beat us. See? Now, obviously, if you're mashing right in their face, then that's a different story. But if you're not doing the close range chains, you're gonna get stuffed. Right? That's how it's gonna work. So this only works when you're doing it like right in their face. If you press the button and then press the button outside of doing this right in their face, technically it's their turn, right? So when you're making people block and doing block strings and stuff like that, your goal is to control that space as well as keep an eye on your frames. Even though you're negative, you can still steal your turn back by spacing yourself out because your opponent can't hit you anything. There are very few things Ryu can do to hit me when I do this. There are some things that he can do, but very few. Let's see if we can point out what he can do. Heavy punch doesn't work because she's crouching too much. I'm pretty sure a sweep would easily reach her. A crouching medium kick would reach her, but let's go ahead and show that. Oops, wrong kick. See? Now, but if we space it perfectly, he'll whiff. If we do it at the max of tip of the range, it's his turn, but because he can't reach us, we just end up whiff punishing him, and then we can run our Oki set play, right? So, spacing when it comes to block strings is controlling that spacing, using it to your advantage, is a very key factor when it comes to doing block strings as well as plus frames, right? You just want to have an understanding of what your opponent is most likely going to do and what their options are. Like we stated, if you do something like this and then you decide to jab afterwards, which is most likely what you're going to do. If you watch higher level Chun Li players, this is what they do. They don't do wacky stuff like this because this would be 12 frames. So it would be quote unquote 1 frame faster, but that's not a lot. Most of what Ryu does is going to beat you if you do something stupid like that. Alright, so you're not really making good use out of your frames if you do something crazy like this, right? See what I'm saying? So it's, even if we do like a light punch, right, he's just gonna stuff you out of it. But if we do this sequence right here, you can't do anything about it. Or if we do this twice, it trades. Right, so that 1 frame advantage will tell you you're probably going to be doing a jab afterwards, right? And even if the opponent doesn't press, you're still +1. So you can do like a block string like this. Now, unless you're, like I said, sometimes it's about the method of thinking. Technically speaking, it's your opponent's turn if you do this. They can interrupt it. See? So you see higher level Chun Li players do this all the time. Justin Wong, King Urameshi, etc. Right? Moki. See, yeah, I'm losing every single time. Technically, it's the opponent's turn if you do something like this. But why does it work? Because let's go ahead and set the bot to like shimmy, to do the platinum shimmy. When you're doing all this bullcrap right here, your opponent doesn't know what you're gonna do. Like both of you are trying to feel each other out, see what's gonna happen, right? You have no idea what's gonna happen, right? So if you just bust out a jab like this, nobody's gonna react to that unless you have somebody that was born with a Sharingan, which is a Sharingan and a Rinnegan at like both combined. Unless you have somebody with like unbelievably like fast godlike reflexes like Minato Namikaze or something, they're not gonna react to a jab. Like I say, even I complain about my reaction speed, but even the most like energy drink infused pro players are not going to react to you doing a simple one jab, right? That's Tekken lingo for all of my Tekken players. But if you do your jab with Chun Li, unless you're obvious and you keep doing this every single time, they're not gonna just react to you doing something like this. Yeah, if you're just doing this stuff to your opponent here, they don't know what you're gonna do. So if you just randomly bust out with this, they're not gonna respond in time unless they are mashing. Unless you have somebody that's just constantly mashing, crouching medium punch or something like that, they're not gonna respond to this sequence, right? So this is a good example of how you can use logic in order to help your and knowledge of the way the game is played to help your block strings as well as the spacing and plus frames. So like I said, technically they can interrupt this, but they're not, if you're this close to them, they can interrupt you, but they're not going to do it because unless you're obvious, they're not going to react to that. Now, taking it to the next level, if you space it far enough, they can't hit you anyway, right? Too far. See, this is a technically a block string that is leading to a punish counter. This means you are with punishing your opponent, and you can do your, you can run your set play on them and stuff like that, right? So this is an example of a simple block string that you could do using spacing, right? See that? Now you can't do that with something like this, unfortunately. Too far, right? It doesn't matter how much I space this. Chun Li can't avoid that because of the proximity guard. You're gonna get your legs flicked if they do that. That's a good check to this situation. But if you do this, right? Like there are certain things you can do. If you do that, you space it properly. If they press, you can just whiff punish them, right? So block strings inherently will, unless you have a move that specifically gives you plus frames or makes it so that you're both neutral, you're always going to be negative after doing your typical block string, right? Like I said, this is a different story. These are a chain attack that you can mash right in their face. With most characters that are at least the balanced ones, at least you can do this with a lot of different characters, and it's virtually completely uninterruptible. But outside of something like that, plus frames and this type of neutral situation here, you're going to be negative. But you can use spacing in order to take that. Something else you can also do is if you're fighting a defensive opponent, or if you train your opponent to be scared to press something and they just block. And let's say that we had Ryu, he was antsy here whenever we were pressing stuff. He wanted to mash buttons all day long, right? Just mashing all types of crap, right? Now let's say that he got sick of losing all of his HP and he just decided to block. Well, using this type of mind game awareness, you can actually take your turn back and continue to keep pressuring them even though, technically speaking, it's their turn. So mind games also come into play when it comes to doing block strings as well. But we're getting to mind games way, way later because like mind games is the type of stuff that the highest level players use, right? So at the level most of us are at, we don't even need to play mind games, right? Like it's in order to advance. So that's not something we need to worry about. But in general, your block strings are something that, like I said, you're usually going to be negative when you're trying to do them. So you need to be aware of this. Especially if you're fighting somebody that is really reactive and they want to mash buttons as soon as possible. You got to be aware of your frame advantage as well as the spacing. Because if you have plus frames, you can take your turn back. Right? If you have plus frames and if you try to do something like, well, actually, that's not a good example. If you try to do something like this, they can interrupt any option you do. For some odd reason, this one, she just crushes the light punch, but technically speaking, in theory, she loses there, right? That's a very esoteric situation. But let's go ahead and turn this off for a moment. But yeah, so now unfortunately you can't do this one because it's, as you can see, it's too negative, but you can do this one, right? Because you have a frame of advantage, and that's what frame advantage does for you, right? So it's very useful to keep that in your repertoire, in your knowledge banks, to know that you want to be using your plus frames to your advantage to allow you to string together block strings. And then when you use knowledge like this, you can add all of this stuff together. Right, stuff like this. Right? Right. technically our opponent can take their turn, but because we're so spaced out, they can't reach us. So we can just keep throwing tokens all day. Right? So that's that's pretty much the gist of it when it comes to block strings. You're at a disadvantage. So using plus frames, knowledge of how frame data and how people generally are going to play the game intelligently, as we mentioned before, as well as spacing, allow for you to string together some block strings that allow you to, even though you're supposed to be at a deficit, you could end up taking over the game with this stuff, right? There are so many different other examples with Chun Li that you can do. For block strings, this, for example, is a little neat trick. It's pretty much free of charge if you can get them to block that move. This will be one of the best moves in the entire game if they couldn't couch it. If you know how to use it, abuse this with Chun Li. In one of the previous videos before this, I explained how to abuse this a lot more. But this is technically like very free situation right here. They can't interrupt this. They can't punish this. Even if they block all of it, they kind of can't do anything about it. Right? So, and then you can even trade if you get this one, which would allow for you to get a trade combo because you have 10 frames of advantage against Ryu, right? So if they press here, you get to destroy their soul, and if they don't press, then you can just keep going, right? So this is an example of a block string that you can use for my Chun Li enthusiasts out there that are watching it. This is a trick that you can use. Just be mindful that they can duck this hit. So you want to use this in situations where you're sure that they're not going to duck, or if you're walking back and they're moving forward, you can just kind of throw this out, because if you're moving back, it's going to be harder to punish you unless you're super obvious with this, right? So that's another example of a block string that you can abuse against people. But Chun Li has a lot of different things you can do with it. It's just about experimenting and using those stepping stones, the fundamentals that I just mentioned in this video, about the plus frames, the spacing, and just the experience and knowledge of how people want to press buttons in neutral and out of neutral, right? So that's pretty much going to be it for this video. Thank you very much for attending. To those that were specifically interested in how to improve their block strings and block pressure, hopefully this was helpful for you. If you have any other questions regarding this, feel free to leave them in the comment section below. If you have any insight you would like to add that would be useful, feel free to go ahead and add that as well. Anything you know that I could learn from to help improve my game with Chun Li as well. And thank you all very much for attending this dojo session. That's going to be it for this one. I hope you all have a great rest of your day. Take care.